The worst possible scenario has just come true. In the previous episode, you could see how demanding it was to reach this point. But what can you do at such moment? Think. Think, and then think. And think again. It took much longer than what I'm showing you here. At one point, I thought I could try to pull the boulder with a winch as I was dragging fallen trees, but then I decided to check how deep the gore is on the left, and I kicked down a stone lying on the edge of the trail. You can't hear it, but I perfectly heard the sound of it rolling down the slope. And it continued until I turned around and shake my head. That is incredibly long, over 25 seconds. So we were really high up, and on our left side we had an abyss. I did it because I thought, what would happen if, in some unforeseen way, a boulder slid into this abyss with defenders strapped to it, and of course with me inside. I don't think it's necessary to say what. At the time of falling of that relatively small stone, it just made me realize that we wouldn't have any chance. I tried the lever. I tried to move it with the shovel, but it didn't even move. With the dying hope, I thought maybe it was the smaller boulder blocking it, but no, it was just too heavy. So I had no other option but to go back. With the boulder so positioned, it was too likely it would roll over. So the first idea was to reverse, but just how far? The rock ledge on which we found ourselves was really narrow, and the dense vegetation on both sides obscured the views in the mirrors, and anyone who has driven a Defender knows that almost nothing can be seen through the rear window. At least I have the rear mirrors from the Mercedes G-Class installed, so the visibility compared to the standard Defender mirrors is much better. But it doesn't change much when you are reversing among the branches rubbing against the car, and on one side you have an abyss of several hundred meters, the edge of which you can't see. And no spotter to help. It really undermines your self-confidence, at least for anyone with a survival instinct. I will not speed up or cut this part. I will leave it in its entirety to show you what one has to face from time to time during such trips and how much time it takes. After a few corrections to the track, I decided that further reversing was a suicide. I decided to choose a section of the trail wide enough to be able to turn around. Not an easy task, both due to the length of the Defender 110 and its turning radius. But there was no other option. I decided to perform this maneuver in a place where young trees grew on the slope. I thought that the trunks would be a good indication of where the precipice begins, and if God forbid the front wanted to collapse or slip, I would lean on them and it would stop me from falling. And that's exactly what I did. I made a split view for you here so you can see how much effort this maneuver required and what visibility I had. As you can see, the only indication of where the shelf ended was the trunks in front of me. The edge of the abyss was drowned in thick vegetation, so even looking out the window did not guarantee that I still had solid ground under my wheels. On the other side, I had a spare wheel on the back door and a vertical stone wall, so I had to be careful not to hit it with the wheel and damage the door and the car's body. That feeling when the whole maneuver was a success. Hard to describe the relief. But only for a moment. Awareness of all these difficult places that we had to overcome to get here was not something nice.
It's gonna be the ride of your life.
I remember perfectly well how at one point I thought, I hope I won't have to come back here. Well, here we are. Again on the same trail, where we will have to overcome the same obstacles again. And even though we had already overcome them once, going down sometimes required a different line. Here, for example, on the right side we had a rather deep hole, and I was afraid that taking this turn with a tight line might tilt the defender too dangerously, so I decided to lean a little more outside of this turn. Never too much foresight, especially during solo trips.
Game on, bring all you got.
Having reached this place, I felt a significant relief. I knew the worst part was behind me and finally I could release that pressure that had built up during the last almost 3 hours of struggle. Do you remember that conifer from the previous episode? As you could see, my driving over it did not cause any damage at all and she was proudly standing in the middle of the road again. And here you are, my beloved pet, who bravely endured the hardship of this crossing without causing any problems. As if she knew that in such moments there is nothing to lean out and you have to politely wait out all the hardship to finally get a reward in the form of another quiet place somewhere by the river where you can finally rest. In the meantime, I will put my nose in my man's hand and somehow endure these endless hours of driving. Kira loved to ride like that, as if my zen and closeness were all she needed. Here's a satellite view of the trail we wanted to take, and we were doing quite well looking at the waypoints, but unfortunately we only got here. That's why the first thing I did after this mountain wandering was to make Kira feel a bit more comfortable. After getting out of the car, you could see how fed up she was with this drive. She immediately set off towards a nearby restaurant and hid herself under one of the tables, from under which it was hard to get her out. Therefore, we continued our walk on the leash this time. Kira was a very sociable dog and loved people, but the lady with the kid under the bridge was not interested in making new friends, especially with the wet ones, which Kira definitely didn't like. She was waiting patiently for any call, but as there was none, she decided to give her a moment to change her mind, cooling herself in the Neretva again. Still, close enough to react immediately if she was called. But as she wasn't, she tried again. But again there was no reaction, so I pulled her back and poor dog, resigned, went to do what she loved the most. Wading in the water. Here you can see how crystal clear the Neretva is. It would be difficult for a human to fully immerse himself in it due to the shallow water, but for Kira, the water level was perfect. It was a really great place to catch a breath after a few hours of driving in the heat. And it was extremely hot that day. After a bit of relaxation on the banks of the Neretva and plans to continue the journey towards the border with Montenegro on normal roads, I decided to pump up some tires, because we were still at quite low pressure for off-road driving. And around 1:30 p.m. we continued our journey along the R960 road towards Trnovo. The route ran along the eastern side of the Wysocica mountain. It is a mountain located south of Bielaśnica, the slopes of which we traveled earlier. The highest peak of Wysocica is Jamija, Mosk, 1967 meters above sea level. According to the folk tradition, the name of the peak comes from the fact that once At the end of summer, farmers made a mosque from pieces of cheese at the very top as a sign of gratitude for the numerous lush pastures that are located on the mountain. Vysočica is a natural border between Bosnia and Herzegovina. Some people disagree, but everyone agrees that it is one of the most beautiful mountains in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Unfortunately, this entire area is also known as a battlefield during the 1992-1995 Bosnian War. Much of the demining activity has improved security conditions, and you don't hear of any accidents, but caution should be exercised. Quite an interesting approach is to look around for garbage. Local residents say it's good to spot them because it means people have passed through the area recently, which in turn means no landmines here. An original approach to littering, you have to admit. At some point between the peaks of Puzin and Crveni Kuk, a gravel road can be seen that winds up to a place that seemed to me a great vantage point. It was generally okay, but was really steep, and at some point I had to engage the low gearbox, as the weight did not allow me to climb on the fast gears. This part required a lot of focus and attention, because slipping off this road with a car with such a high center of gravity could end up with uncontrolled roll down the slope. Fortunately, everything ended up okay, and we finally landed in a place with a wonderful views of the area. I really like this part of Bosnia and Herzegovina when it comes to views. Vast and picturesque pastures intertwine with bare limestone rocks. Dense pine forest and canyons cutting into the mountains create a unique atmosphere. Due to its distance from Sarajevo, Vysočica has not been visited often in the past. The construction of the new roads has made it accessible to many nature lovers, and it is becoming more and more popular every year, as it provides many opportunities all year round, from hiking in the summer to skiing in the winter. To this day, the Balkans and especially Bosnia and Herzegovina are unknown territory for many. It remains a blind spot in Europe and in the minds of the outdoor community. It's still associated with war and poverty instead of wild and untamed nature and mountains. From the Croatian border to the border with Montenegro, the trail runs along the wonderful massives and national parks that are worth visiting when planning your next trip. You have to be prepared that you will encounter such obstacles from time to time. But it only adds color to the exploration of this country. And standard roads can also stay in the memory for a bit longer. We spent the next night just next to the Stjepan Polje border crossing, at the Drina River. It was a piece of a private land of the rafting company. However, the owner allowed us to stay at the riverside, although there was a camp a bit higher. So we set up our little camp here, resting before the next surprises we hoped Montenegro will provide us. But more on that in the next episode.